Welcome. I'm Dr. Sanjeev Khagram, the Dean and Director General of the Thunderbird School of Global Management. On behalf of the school and our wonderful university here, the Arizona State Knowledge Enterprise, I have the honor of welcoming you to this event today. We have distinguished guests from our friends and partners from Oman that we want to welcome. We're honored to have. We're going to start off by having two of our wonderful students. As you know, we have students from 45 countries around the world. Thunderbird is the first and premier school of global leadership management in the world, 45,000 alumni in 140 countries. And our goal is always a world in which we connect, we collaborate, we trade, and prosper together. Our mission is to promote global leadership for sustainable and equitable prosperity worldwide. And it is in that spirit, as part of this great institution, that we welcome our guests from the great country of Oman. I'm going to introduce two students who will introduce our guests, and then we'll proceed to the discussion. Hishan Abdul and Hannah Savage, please.
Thank you. His Excellency Dr. Ali bin Masoud Al Sunaidy is the Sultanate of Oman's Minister of Commerce and Industry and Deputy Chairman of the Supreme Council for Planning. In addition to these duties, His Excellency serves as Chairman of the Oman Tourism Development Company, as well as Chairman of the Public Authority for SME Development. He also serves as Chairman of Al Ruft Fund, a financial organization aimed at supporting, encouraging, and promoting entrepreneurial growth and advancement in the Sultanate. His Excellency is also a member of the Financial Affairs and Energy Resources Council and a member of the board of the State General Reserve Fund. He is the former Minister of Sports Affairs and Chairman of the Omani Olympic Committee. His Excellency previously served as the Chairman of the Information Technology Authority, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Public Establishment for Industrial Estates, and Chairman of the Gulf Organization for Industrial Consulting. Additionally, he was a member of the Tender Board, the Public Authority for Social Insurance, and a founding member of the National Information Technology Committee. His Excellency was awarded a PhD in economics from the University of Hull in the United Kingdom, a master's degree in business administration from the University of Bristol in the UK, and a Bachelor of Science Industrial Engineering from the University of Miami. Thank you and welcome.
Sorry, we're reading from a paper. We don't want to get it wrong. In December 2005, His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Sayyid appointed Hunaina Al Mughairy as ambassador to the United States. The ambassador is an economist with an extensive business background. From 1999 to 2005, she served as a representative of the Omani Center for Investment Promotion and Export Development in New York City. She served in numerous other senior positions as well in her distinguished career, including as the Center's Director General and advisor to the Undersecretary for Industry at the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. She has a BA from High Political Institute in Cairo and an MA in Economics from New York University.
Thank you so much. Before I continue, I do want to also welcome Ambassador Man Arakat, our true friend and colleague from the MENA region who works with us closely there. Thank you so much for all that you do for us, Ambassador. So, before we begin with the questions, I'll be asking a series of questions to the Minister and Ambassador today. I wanted to ask if they wanted to make a few brief opening comments. So please, Minister.
Well, thank you very much. Very privileged to be here. And I understand the diversity of this school. And what's interesting also is to see how business and academia come together. I think this is becoming a norm everywhere around the world, and there is no fine line between the two. During the time where I went to school, I think we believed in, as an industry engineer, believed in mass production, believed in rigid rather lines. And what we saw today in the morning, that it's becoming very flexible. And with that flexibility, I think we are able to tap into the minds of people around the world. And so what we see now is a collaborative spirit as opposed to a competitive spirit. And competition is in between somewhere, but we're seeing designers, as we saw today, and from different parts of the world contribute to design of a car. One area of interest, and some of the people that I have, which are scattered around you today, is we are able to see how two people from two different countries can add value to a project without physically being trapped in the same room. This is what we try to envisage and what we will see over the years. And our visit here today is to be able to contribute to that and be able to establish new links that did not exist before. Many examples in content development, content management, both content for entertainment and content for education. We're seeing it today. Oman, different from many other countries, we speak, besides English and Arabic, we also have people speaking Swahili, which is probably the only country out of Africa that speaks Swahili. We also have people speaking Farsi, which is spoken in Iran and a few other countries around. We have people speaking Baluchi and Urdu, which is spoken in Pakistan. And so when you put those people which are living in the same street together, you get this phenomenal capabilities of understanding the differences between people. I also want to close with a note that let's take an example of cybersecurity today. I just flew in last night from Kenya, and I saw 24 hours ago, I saw a group of Kenyans working together in something called IHOP. And if you sit around that place, it could be in New York, it could be in DC, it could be in Tokyo for that matter. This capability that is being created because of this new media has enabled us to come together and understand that a cyber threat is not necessarily going to be fought over technology, but over detecting the behavior of the person who will cause the threat. And as long as you know their language, you know how they live, you can predict a threat on cybersecurity. In Oman, we like to say that we are one of the best countries. In fact, we were 2 years ago number 4 in the world because of 2 centers we have. And I think the reason is because we understand a threat before it comes. So with that, I would close my talk by saying, when I come to a place like this, I don't anymore see any segregation between the real business environment and school. For some reason, they have collided together. And we've seen that today, and we'll see it as we go. So my advice to some of you, as much as you can, create this interlink between the 3 pillars. The governments, which will do the regulation, and if they misunderstand you, they will not be proper regulation. The private sector and the entrepreneurs who would make things happen, and you, students in the academic world. Think if the 3 create much more platforms like the ones we've been seeing in this trip, we are able to maximize on our capabilities, minimize the distortions, and be able to create for mankind, for people, for societies, something that is of true meaning. I would like just some of the people who are around us here stand up, if you would stand up, Doctora. This is one in our delegation who started about 2 years ago with a small company in a small, probably, warehouse. It was a $200,000 US, and today they own 70% of a business, which is nearly $15 million. Her and her husband. And these are medical doctors, actually, medical doctors who decided to quit on their job and created a frankincense company which does oils for perfumery and for medical care from an old tree. Probably Zuena is here. Zuena, she leads her own company. Because of her and her capability, there are 800 families around Oman through social media and internet. She dictates design, and then they produce for her gift items that range from probably $30 US to something like $750 US while they're at home. So there are 800 families. Without her, they would not have reached to where they are. And we have about 32,000 SMEs registered in Oman. She is one of those examples. Firas is here. Some of them will be presenting tomorrow for those of you who can make it. He, again, they were some of the hackers. Actually, the best hackers in town. And we, about 5 years ago, we decided to find them. And we sent two young, talented, one man, one woman, below 20 years. At that time, I was a chairman of IT. I said, let's find the best hackers in town. For us, actually, I think programs about 6, 7 languages, computer languages. Now, they are working on a phenomenal project for us, which will create the Omani house in Dubai for the Expo 2020. And I cannot tell you much because a lot of it is intellectual property, but that they are saying they will challenge the 6, 7 senses of people. They will not stop at 2 senses. So you will not see, you will not hear, but they will submerge you. And he has a team of 20 people, but they created something called the Innovation Factory. By the way, some of this you could Google at your, or on time. Malak Shebani is here as well. Malak, she's actually our first incubator. It's 800 square meter of space, just like this space. It's not far from the Sultan Qaboos University. And this 800 square meter, they grew. In 2017, they sold nearly 5.5 million US dollars out of 800 square meter. These are all design, services, programming, etc., etc. So she leads that. And who else is here? Dr. Ahmed, he is the CEO of our SME authority. There are 32,000 SMEs registered under him. And so they also help people in feasibility studies, and they're doing incubators, etc. Have I missed anyone from Oman? I think that's about it. Did I miss anybody? No. So this is some of the people who flew in today and tomorrow to be able to interact with you over the next, say, 24, 36 hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. The themes you speak about, global leadership, management, entrepreneurship for the fourth industrial revolution, all the way to the bottom of the pyramid, bringing cultures together in a multicultural environment, learning languages, both of the analog version and the digital version, and engaging with them. These are the core strengths and goals of the Thunderbird School of Global Management. So we're so delighted to have you and your leadership here. Ambassador, if you could share a little bit about your own story, and for those in our audience who may not know much about Oman, maybe give a little sense of the Sultanate and the country.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here this evening. Thank you very much, Dr. Arakat, for introducing me to the university here. As they mentioned in my CV, that I was appointed ambassador in 2005. I'm the first Arab woman ambassador to the United States. It hasn't been easy because I was not only the Omani ambassador. Since I was a woman, I represented all Arabs, because if I had failed, they would have said, we sent a woman there and she failed. So I had to work twice as hard to represent all the Arab women.
Excuse me, Ambassador, we're going to get you a better mic. There we are.
I'm also the chair of the Sultan Qaboos Cultural Center, which was established in 2005. And this is His Majesty's vision about changing the misconception that people have about our region. Usually, especially the media here, show a picture of a lot of misconceptions that are happening in my region. So the center was established to exchange culture between the United States and Oman. That's in short. Oman has the first. Morocco was the first country to recognize the United States, but Oman was the first country to send an envoy to the United States. The first ambassador from an Arab country to the United States, Ahmed bin Mohammed, landed in New York in 1840 during the time of President Van Buren. But before that, in 1833, Oman signed the first treaty of amity and commerce between the United States and an Arab country. And that was in 1833 with President Jackson. When His Excellency Ahmed Nouman landed in New York in 1840, he came with him a lot of gifts. And amongst the gifts, which were carpets and jewelry, were 2 Arabian horses. The president wanted to keep one of the horses, and Congress said, no, you could not keep the horse because these are gifts to the government. So he negotiated, and they allowed him to keep one of the Arabian horse. Now, the price of an Arabian horse during those days in 1840 was $100. And that is the reason why no government, so we made history, Oman made history, because no government employee is allowed to take a gift of more than $100. So we are responsible for that. If you go through this.
The law was established.
We're a country of 4 million, and we are situated in the southern eastern corner of Arabian Peninsula. Most of our population is quite young, so you will see this is why we have young ministers. Other than that, we have a number of students here in the United States. We have about 4,500 students here in the United States. We have over 1,800 schools. We have 2 government universities, and we have a number of private universities. Education and health is free in the Sultanate of Oman. I think my 3 minutes are, I can go on, but I think my 3 minutes, 3 minutes. But we would like to welcome all of you to visit us in Oman. And of course, not only visit us in Oman, but there's a short hop from here there are direct flights to Washington, D.C., where we have the Sultan Qaboos Cultural Center. And we also have the Omani embassy there. So you're welcome to visit us anytime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Minister, maybe you could share a little bit about how the Sultanate is trying to diversify from its oil dependence, what types of innovation and entrepreneurial activities and policies you're putting in place. What have been some of the successes and lessons learned?
Right. Well, there was a change in 1970s. Majlis Sultan Qaboos took over, and we did a bit of oil. Oil then dominated the GDP. And at that time, the GDP were in the millions, actually. Now, it is very close to 80 billion US dollars, 33 of which is attributed to oil and gas. However, because we don't tax people enough, we depend on oil to contribute to more than 78% of our income. And this is why 3 years ago, as we saw a decrease in the oil prices, we had this big dialogue in the country, whereby also the cabinet engaged the Majlis Oman, which is the Majlis Shura and Majlis Dawla. These are the 2 houses. And we said it's about time we do something that would allow us to be sustainable other than depending on oil and gas. So very, very quietly, I think, we were able to move to a cost-reflective tariff in electricity for manufacturing, so to cut down on subsidies. And we pulled together a Tanfeedh program which brought in people in different rooms like these, where business people, academic people, government entities, big companies, spent about 6 weeks together each. And they came up with 5 sectors. And those sectors were manufacturing, fisheries, tourism, logistics, and minerals. There is also a big drive in doing ports and airports and free zones. So that also came along over the years. And now we have Salalah Port, which is facing the Indian Ocean, and that has a capacity of 4 million TEUs per year. That's a partnership with A.B. Muller Maersk. We have Sohar Port, which is a partnership with Rotterdam, and that does 1 million and could grow to 2 million. And we have the Duqm Free Zone and Port, which is in partnership with Entrep. And these 3 partnerships are well selected because we brought in very efficient systems in these ports. And today I can tell you that from Port Salalah to New York, it takes you only 19 days. So actually we have Octal, which produces plastics for Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola. After they finish producing them in Salalah, it takes them 19 days to deliver them to their customers in New York. So diversification have gone quite well. And as I said, we are considering VAT, we are considering, proper taxation. But I think it's not taxation that will do the trick. It is the SMEs as well as the pure diversification from the existing centered around oil and gas economy. And we are seeing talent like the ones you've seen today they represent a sample, a very small sample of 32,000 people that are already active in SMEs. And they represent a small sample of 1,800 firms that a Rafid fund has given them loans. And the loans go from 250,000 US dollars, and they could reach up to double the size of that, 500,000. And the idea is that those fresh graduates should not be job seekers, but they should create jobs for people. So you would see the story of a person, lady, young, talented lady will create a job for, as we said today, about 800 families. And tourism in particular is close to our heart. The terrain, if you Google Oman today, you see some of the pictures, you cannot imagine that it actually snows in Oman, which it does. Jabal Akhdar is 2,400 meters above sea level. In winter, it actually snows. It did snow. We don't know why it's acting like that, but it's been acting funny in the last 3-4 years. And people have taken pictures of snow, actually, in that part of the world. But there is also fish farming, which we are really into. We think by 2025, the Gulf will consume, every time they will consume 3 kilograms of fish or 3 pounds of fish, 2 of them will have to come from sea farm, because we don't think the seas will sustain them. So we are into, that. Minerals is under-discovered, and I think some of the questions today will come to that when we reach them. That's an area of interest to us as well. So these 5 sectors, alongside with ICT and energy, are actually driving the economy.
What are some of the most difficult barriers, Minister, that you're facing in this diversification process?
The mindset is one of them. I think before 1970, people were reluctant to work for the government. We were merchants. Before 1970, we were a seafaring nation. And people did not like to work for the government. I guess in 1970, the new government came in and the expansion happened. So everyone tilted to the government. And the government meant a big chair, probably a big seat, a nicer room, and sometimes a government car. So everyone went there. And it became everybody's dream to work for the government. All of us. I mean, I was in the States, and when they recruited me, they actually came looking for me in 1988. And I haven't met them until I came to Muscat, and they said, we came scouting out for talent for the government. Actually, Hunaina was then in the Ministry of Commerce Industry, probably one of the people who at that time also interviewed me. And they said, we want some young people and with new ideas. Now we want to reverse that. And we want to say, actually, the government does not. So there is one number I will give you. In 2014, about 245,000 people worked for the government, and 190 worked for the private sector, Omanis. Today, only 215,000 work for the government, and about 245,000 work for the private sector. But the private sector is also changing. Many of the young people don't work for people anymore. They want to work for themselves. So we get these clusters now that are happening whereby people are working as freelancers, and then they are owning companies together, and then they are creating jobs for others. And I think the big boys, the big companies have not realized that. It didn't hit them. That talent does not want to be strapped into a seat in a company or in the government. So if you see advertisement in Oman TV now, and we were able to convince the minister in charge of that, we told them, don't recruit the best, filmmakers. Subcontract them. So with Malak here, the incubators there now, they create a job for you. They create, a working space for you for 3 years. And Oman TV comes and subcontract the companies from there. So instead of working full-time with Oman TV now pays the money depending on how much they are willing to spend per minute per TV time. And this is the new culture. And this was this paradigm shift of, and I remember the times, and I think still, when one wants to get married, the husband or wife will ask them, where do you work? And if they say we have our company, it means you are unemployed. It is true, and I've heard that many times. But in recent years, we've been telling them that those unemployed make about 4 to 5 times the salary of a minister. So people will change their minds. Sooner or later, they will realize that actually you're marrying the wrong man or woman. If you are marrying an ambassador or minister, you better get married to one of them. But that was a big barrier. This mindset barrier has been our biggest challenge, but I think it's changing. And maybe later on tonight and tomorrow when they speak, they will share some of that.
That is phenomenal. I mean, here at Thunderbird, 3 of our core values and principles are an entrepreneurial mindset, a global mindset, and a principle that one of our founders stated as a world frequented by traders seldom needs soldiers.
Right.
And so with that, Ambassador, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the free trade zones that Oman has developed. What have been some of the challenges and successes with those free trade zones?
Okay. We started negotiating the free trade agreement between Oman and the United States in 2005, and then it was signed by President Bush in 2006. But it went into effect in 2009 because there were some of the things that we needed to ratify and correct before it became an agreement. The free trade agreement, we've done very well, but not as well as we would have loved to do. But still, we're working on it. So far, since it went into effect, which is 10 years now, exports to the United States from Oman have gone up 60%, and export from the United States to Oman has increased to 25%. 36 new companies have been registered in these last 10 years from the United States. I just got the latest statistics actually this morning, where it says U.S. exports of services to Oman were estimated at 469 million in 2016, more than 215. Leading services exports from the U.S. to Oman were in travel, maintenance, repair service, and financial service sector. Oman is the 74th largest supplier of goods, of imports in 2017. U.S. goods imports from Oman total 1.1 billion in 2017, down 5.2% from 2016, but up 2.5% from 2017. U.S. imports from Oman are up 25.3%. The top import categories in 2017 were plastics, 253 million, fuel, 243 million, precious metals and stone, jewelry, gold, 169 million, aluminum, and iron and steel products. U.S. total imports of agricultural products from Oman totaled 10 million in 2017. Leading categories include essential oils, 3 million, snacks, foods, 2 million, other vegetable oils, and rubber. Trade and services with Oman totaled estimated 784 million in 2016, which is the latest statistics which you have right now. Services export total 469 million, services import total 315 million. According to the Department of Commerce, U.S. exports of goods and services to Oman supported an estimated 14,000 jobs in 2015. 12,000 supported by goods export and 3,000 supported by services export. I have more statistics if anybody is interested. I have this with me. So actually, the free trade agreement has been a win-win between Oman and the United States. Of course, when you have a free trade agreement, there is a new market that is open. There's a lot of competition, which also encourages our industries to work twice as hard to be able to compete with companies that will be exporting to these countries. Initially, we established the free trade agreement not because of our export, but also to attract investment into Oman for countries that will produce into Oman and export to the United States. I think that's in a nutshell.
That's great. And Minister, if I could come back to you, you mentioned you were just in Kenya. I want to mention someone else we have as always with Thunderbird, we bring people from all over the world. My good close friend Philip Taigo is here. He's the senior advisor to the Deputy President of Kenya, and want to welcome Philip to Thunderbird. What we are witnessing is a very ambitious and aggressive agenda by the Sultanate of engaging with countries around the world in terms of free trade, investment. Could you share some experiences from your recent visit to Kenya? And also, last March, there was, I believe, a meeting between the United States and Oman at the Chamber of Commerce. So what were some of the ideas that were generated there, some of the policies and agreements that are starting to take shape in terms of our relations between the two countries?
Well, as Hunaina said, we had this FTA with the United States, and the GCC also had an agreement with Singapore, and then they had an agreement with Switzerland. In the past, I think the WTO has governed multilateral trade relationships. And then bilateral trade went using the norms of the WTO. But after the Doha round, and I was in some of these meetings actually, even in Indonesia and Bali, I think some people lost faith in the way WTO works, and we've seen unfortunately, a growing drive towards protectionism again. Sadly, trade wars will also become fashionable over the last year or so. So countries now have to go back to square one, the drawing board, which is bilateral. So you'll see more activities now happening between countries as opposed to the world in general. In our discussions at Oman Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I think the FTA with America functions, although it was not needed if the WTO was functioning well. But now that we see barriers happening, I think we will do more bilateral trade. So we are now becoming very frequently moving as opposed to what used to be. Take Kenya, for example. In Kenya, I had with me 200 businesswomen and businessmen. And there was about 82 businesses. So 82 companies were exhibiting and about 200 people. And it seems like there is more movement between Africa and the Middle East now more than ever. Because Africa is discovering oil and gas. There is more laws on corruption, so there is a grip over corruption. There is also obviously logistics, which is serving us, because the free zones that we have in Oman, each one of them has an airport and has a port attached to it, the 3 free zones. And all of them are functioning fairly well now. So we think it's about time that we use them to connect. Coming back to the US and Oman, I think the only hiccup that we have now between us is this new tax on aluminum and steel. Our people don't like it, and they don't have enough, profit to pay that extra tax. So I think them and the American importers will have to split that somehow between them. And I think this is why exports are still going, because the two sides, buyer and seller, have agreed to take the pain of that extra levy. With the exception of aluminum and steel, everything else seems to be working fairly well. Coming back to complementarity as opposed to competition. Unfortunately, barriers that are put sometimes deprive the local community from being competitive. If you look at anything made anywhere in the world, very rarely you see 100%. Look at Europe, for example. Look at the UK. I looked at some numbers the other day. 100% of cars produced in the UK are for export. And the UK imports 100% of its cars. I can't figure it out. They import some models. It's a shocking piece of information. Why would you export all of your cars that you make and import all of your cars, so to speak? But I guess the models are different. They use just in time in the UK, which I guess earned them some element of proximity to some markets. If you look at anything that is happening around your construction industry today, a lot of it is done elsewhere. Today we looked at some companies, and I was talking about what is the content, thinking what is the content, what is the local content. There is barely any local content. If you think a human mind, a human brain, someone who lives somewhere in Singapore can contribute to making your company $1 million company, why not? You don't have to give them a visa. You don't have to bring them here anymore. We have bought into a company in Silicon Valley that does 3D printing of characters from the TV. These are Jordanians. They invented some algorithm that if it sees a picture over a film, then it can think of its 3D, and then it can reproduce it through a 3D printer. So these are Jordanians. We bought the share as Omanis, and we moved them to Silicon Valley. And the next customer is a Chinese who wants a Mickey Mouse to be printed for him in China, provided someone has the copyright from Disneyland. You figure it out. Can you put all of those in one room? Of course you can't. Of course you can't. So what I'm trying to say, this protectionism that just woken up, I think it will settle after some point of time. People will realize you cannot anymore make money out of barriers. Barriers will mean that you'll have less. So people will run around barriers. I was in this discussion about how do we tax e-commerce. I mean, we were in Switzerland, in Davos, and most of the ministers there talked about how we do get our money back from them. Uber, how do you tax Uber? How do you tax anybody who does a lot of things over the wires? And I think you don't tax them. You'll just have to add value. You have to create value out of them. But you just cannot keep taxing them, because they will keep moving around and they will be in God knows where tomorrow morning and sell you a service from somewhere where you don't know. And it is for you, the future generation, the people who will change our future and make an impact, make your print. How would you hustle to bring a non-conventional solution for conventional problems? How would the state make money? How would it pay for its people? How would it pay for its roads? You'll have to come up with non-conventional solutions for a very old conventional thing, which is called tax, for example. And the only way you do it is by making sure that people add value, and because they interlock, and each one will make tax, if you would, out of the value that's created in their own country. So if you are not attractive enough, if you don't have a good level of education, if you don't allow a teacher from here to do online teaching, and you say, I will not allow that, if you don't allow internet to be free for people, you're going to be left behind. So you'll have to change your behavior. And I think this is the challenge. The other thing is to do about the way we think. If you sit in this room, you can predict the behavior of a person in London or in Muscat. So I said today, I think over lunch, what happens if it rains in London? And what happens if it rains in Muscat? If it rains in London, through big data, I can tell you how much beef will be sold and how many clothes will be sold, because people will get scared of the rain, go into the mall and buy so much. So you have to stock enough Burger King beef, enough McDonald's beef. What happens when it rains in Oman? You have to stock charcoal and petrol, because everyone wants to go and see the rain outside, and they will do barbecue. One act in two countries, it means two behaviors. And the only way you do it, by checking on credit cards and telephones. If you give me access to telephones, and if you give me access to credit cards, I can very much predict the next behavior of people while sitting here in Arizona without having to visit. I think this is something that was unimaginable when we did our first simulation sometime, say 87, 88, when we did Fortran. Some of you probably still know Fortran. I checked with IBM, by the way, it runs on American intelligence machines. So Fortran, one of the old languages. I did Fortran, and to do a movement of an item, I had to do a program of this thick of papers. Today, our kids will do something in a matter of one thing, one movement of a mouse. So imagine 20 years from now, what would happen if we keep barriers? People will run next to them, on top of them, underneath them. So this behavior of protectionism, it will not survive. I can tell you this much. As a minister and as a person engaged in many dialogues, it's a losing battle. They will win a couple of battles, but it's a losing war, actually. 5 battles, 6 battles here and there. Because if you stop giving visas to people, they will actually work from there. And they will not spend their money here, and they will work from there. And this is why I think a classroom like this will come 10 years later and say the minister told us something. I mean, drones, Firas is here. We are looking at drones for date tree pollination. You know, male, female. Everything God created has a male and female for it to reproduce. Trees are the same. We have to climb them there and make that interaction. So he's fiddling with drone. So then the other day we said, I told them in the meeting, okay, well then we have to make sure that your machine reads the leaves, because the pipe will actually touch them, being a typical traditional industrial engineer. And he looked at me and he said, why would you use a pipe? A hose? I said, because you need to put that. He said, no, I'll use a toy gun and I will shoot at them from a distance. So now he's creating bullets, actually, where he will shoot at the tree and it will explode because the material will be of a material that will explode instead of having a pipe. And this is a person laid back over a cup of coffee. Now, if you exclude him from your team, you lost a big chance of doing something differently. And this is why it will become a process of inclusion, not disclusion. And, okay, I heard someone telling me about people from Gaza, people from Yemen, programming and doing data cleansing. And I met a guy, actually two, a Yemeni and a Palestinian the other day, and they told me they want to work with Oman. I said, what would you do? And they said, we will do things that everybody does. I said, but you are under severe situation. Do you have internet? He said, we do. I said, and do you have electricity? He said, we have the sun. He said, we don't need electricity and we don't need internet. We've got that figured out. Recently, I also was talking to them about a person who invented, this is the last story I will tell you on this. And again, it tells you how a process of inclusion works. This guy actually in Oman has invented a technology that will stop a drone from being where you don't want it to be. The first one was a gun, electric gun. You aim at it, it dismantles the relationship between the drone and the American satellite and the drone and the Russian satellite. So now the drone becomes dizzy, doesn't know where it is in space. So the only thing it can do, it can fall after it runs out of battery, or you can drag it. So then he showed me two new technologies. One is a bag where you sit in a wedding and you put it there. No one will be filming your wedding for as long as that machine is on, because it creates a radius around. No drone can come closer to that house. Recently, he has one for convoys. Now, this guy is not connected to somebody, God knows where. I guess in planet Mars or somewhere. How did he have access to this programming while he never left Oman? Because it's pieces of puzzles. There's got to be a lab somewhere who identifies with him, and they work together, and the product is released and produced and patented in Oman. So you cannot strap them. You cannot say, no, the only way you can do it is we will not give you a visa to this country or that country. The more you do of that, the more intelligent they will become. The more creative they will become. This is what I'm trying to say. So our economy, we're trying to move, to make a long story short, we're trying to move our society. There's 740,000 people in schools today. By the way, did you know that there were only 500 people in schools in 1970? Now there is 740,000. Did you know that in 1970, life expectancy would have been 58 years? Do you know that it is now 78 years in Oman? So now we are worried about diabetic, we're worried about house care, a new set of things that we never worried about in 1970. Because we live longer, that's how we need more care as we live longer. I'm not complaining, I'm saying it's a good thing. It's never,
As we get older, we don't complain about
but
that.
that's the idea, is how do you unveil, because your problems here are becoming our problems there. And we don't need to be on the learning curve that it took you to do what we could do tomorrow morning right there. That's why intellectual property is very important in Oman. We care a lot about it. We are very, and one of the things we think it will help our economy, we are very stringent on specification and we are very stringent on IP. This is very critical there in Oman. That's why many people who want to go to China, they set up in Oman, and sometimes because they say we at least understand that whatever we do here in design is protected. And I think even China in the long term, definitely they have to do more in IP protection if they want people to operate out of China. Otherwise, they will operate from here and sell it to them over the wires.
I'm looking at the time, I'm going to combine the next two questions, and maybe we could put up the slide, Aaron. That'd be great. And you introduced us to your amazing young entrepreneurs here, both women and men. Thunderbird has a long tradition, thanks to our wonderful executive director of Thunderbird for Good, Kelly Kreiser, of working with women entrepreneurs around the world. Women's entrepreneurship, small and medium enterprises seem to be a core part of the development strategy for Oman. Could you share a little bit more about why those are so important? What are some of the policies you're putting in place?
Why not ask them? Malak,
okay,
why
don't
you
please.
answer? Ask one of them.
Okay, please,
Malak,
join us.
Malak, come on.
Malak?
It's you. If you can answer this question. What is...
Come back again.
About the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Women in entrepreneurship. And women in Oman.
Women in Oman. Malak, stand up.
You want to come here facing the audience?
I'm going to kick.
Sure,
Yes,
system, or do you want to...
Well, both of them, Malak. I mean, this is part, but women in particular.
I just wanted to say, with terms of women entrepreneurship in general, you've met two of our entrepreneurs. There's no discrimination between male and female. So again, I think in the MENA region as a whole, in Oman, we are supporting female entrepreneurs. But I think traditionally we need more women entrepreneurs. And that has nothing to do basically with the systems and the processes, because there's no, as I said, there's no discrimination in Oman. And maybe one important fact that I should share, Oman, in terms of gender parity, in terms of equal pay, the gap is even less than 3%.
Actually, we are better than you. when it
Yes.
comes to that.
So in Australia, it's 45%. So you,
I think I'd like to answer that. Before coming to the United States, as they mentioned, before coming to Washington, I was in New York and I was working for the Oman Center for Investment Promotion and Export Development. What surprised me was, and what really shocked me was, that in the United States, in corporate governments, up to today, women do not earn the same salary as men. While in Oman, I am the ambassador to the United States. My husband was the ambassador to the United Nations, and we both earned the same salary.
so that gives you an indication. So in terms of women entrepreneurship, the numbers are growing. We'd like to see more of them. So we are looking at a couple of programs that will basically support women entrepreneurs. A lot of the corporate companies, some of them in certain areas, do focus on women entrepreneurs. So, but again, it's something that we'd like to see more women, especially in technology. And this is something I think even here in the US, you've got a lot of programs of women in technology to get more women also to work in very innovative areas. An interesting fact, in the Indian Ocean Rim, a group of countries, Oman has the largest number of graduates, female graduates in science, and basically in sciences and in technology, which is something that's very interesting. Now we need to see what more we can do for women. Just to go back to the ecosystem, if I can just stay on this side and explain this to you. I use the Babson model to map our ecosystem. Our ecosystem is basically moving. We have the elements in place right now. And I've put some of these are by no means all of the organizations, but the key ones. So in about 2013, the leadership of our ecosystem actually started by His Majesty with a conference that was convened in January 2013. It included all the ecosystem players, all the stakeholders, which means public, private, and actually entrepreneurs were taking a lead in saying what were some of the issues that they were facing. And out of that, we started looking at the regulatory framework, including the institutions, the funding. And His Excellency mentioned about the culture. We had a very much risk-averse culture. Originally, we were traders, but then suddenly with oil, people were very comfortable getting a government job. So the last 5 or 6 years, we're continuously working on changing culture. So we have entrepreneurship being taught at the universities right now. We have students' competitions. We celebrate Global Entrepreneurship Week. We have institutions and infrastructure like incubators and accelerator. I run one myself. We've created a super hub. And we've also started getting the corporate companies, the major oil companies, involved in supporting entrepreneurship. Now, initially they thought it was CSR. Now, what's happening is, hey, the only way we can survive, we have limited oil reserves, we're looking at energy right now, is basically for us to take a stake in some of these energy accelerators. So when I go back, we're going to be launching an energy accelerator, which is fully privately funded. So we are moving into that, and this is the way basically for the future to survive. So we've got the infrastructure, changing the culture, a lot of competitions. We do startup weekends as well. We do tech weeks. We do, as I said, global entrepreneurship weeks. This is all about changing the culture. We started showing how we celebrate entrepreneurship by having an annual, twice a year, every 2 years, an award. And I think Zuena was one of the receivers of the best women entrepreneur, and so did Firas. So. And this is a very
Firas as well. Firas, you did receive
this is
one.
a high level event basically, and it's widely covered in the media. And again, a little bit by bit, the culture is changing. When you speak to students right now, at least 50% will consider entrepreneurship as a career. So basically, this is in a nutshell. The funding is there, so we've got loans, equity, startup equity grants. We're still looking into things like crowdfunding. It's not there yet, but I think gradually, with the legislation, right legislation, we'll be able to do that.
Thank you so much. So we're near the end of our time, but there's one or two questions, Minister Ambassador, if I could just ask you. Many of us are interested, what were the reasons why Oman decided not to join the GCC currency?
I think it's important to understand, when do you join a currency? I had a big discussion, I remember at one point of time, with Michael Posner. Michael Posner used to be a famous writer in the Financial Times. And Michael Posner, late Michael Posner, was my supervisor for my master's when I did that in Bristol. We had this discussion. Why the UK did not join the European Union, Euro. Fundamentally, you need to arrive to a fully functioning, aligned, integrated market in order to move a step forward. The Gulf did not get there. Because once you have one market and your regulation is at sync, then you are not worried that some market will misbehave and drag you down with it. I think you've seen Europe. Although Europe was supposed to be one of the most advanced, most sophisticated, some became the lenders, some became the borrowers, and it's a big mess right now. And if they can help it, they will keep them together. I'm not too sure how long. So to get to a stage where you have one central bank having the destiny of all, you need to have graduated to it, and we have not. Secondly, is to do with the nature of a country like Oman or Bahrain. We have less oil and gas than everybody else. And so we would need to do something with our central bank that others may not have to do. And it will be 2 countries plus compared to 4. The 4 are heavily dependent on oil and gas. We don't. We will run out of oil and gas in 20, 30 years. So we have to do something to excite our people and intervene with a monetary policy which may not echo elsewhere. Thirdly is to do with size. Look at the size of Oman. It's 4.5 million, out of which 4.6, out of which 2.5 are Omani. That is so small compared to a country like Saudi Arabia. So whatever you want to do is not going to be equal. Finally is the maturity of the politics. Because if you look at Europe, you've got a lot of discussions going on and a lot of people contribute. You've got a mature media. So to do something with a central bank, something will outweigh the other. I don't think we are mature enough to be able to be discussing one currency. So it was a very well-informed, wise decision that Oman took. And now many people say, well, we share your opinion. That's why it hasn't taken off. Could have been. By the way, we said 5 could go on. We might catch up with you later. 4 could go on. We'll catch up with you later. But no one did. So we don't think the Gulf has matured enough to be similar to what you would see in the European Union. And I don't think there is any other example in the world but the European Union. It has had its own teething problems, and we've been monitoring it very. So it was not out of arrogance, though some people would have thought, or not with any hidden agenda. It was simply because we are very clear on the subject. We are not mature enough to be a one currency. And now they've realized that everybody else said, oh, actually you are right, we are not. So I hope as blunt, as transparent as possible.
Well, this is great lessons for our students and for our faculty and all of us. Maybe I can end, Minister, to ask you a little bit about the future. You have Vision 2040. Your husband is the ambassador to the UN. We have the retired, but we have the 2030 agenda. Where do you see Oman 10, 15 years from now? Where would you like to see it? And how at we at Thunderbird and ASU can we partner and contribute?
I think the ambassador, His Excellency, will answer that because he's a member of the Supreme Planning.
Okay.
Okay.
So that would be his this thing.
When we did the 2040, we went around the country and we asked people in every government, what do you want? And over a question of, do I do a road? Do I do a hospital or a school? They said, no, 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 give us Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi. So you could see that we will not be separate from the world. It will be a knowledge-based economy, no doubt about it. We have a lot of mountains, just like you here. So we have a lot of minerals. People will still feed on minerals. You can't do anything without minerals. We have gas. We discovered good quantities of gas, and we think by the end of the year or next year, will announce new discoveries. We hope that there is something in the pipeline. But all of that relates to knowledge economy. Is how do you submerge this into an economy which will feed itself into streamlining itself into becoming more efficient. I'll give you an example. In the oil fields, there are two technologies we brought in. It shows you how the world, and I am sitting now also in a group with World Economic Forum in Davos, which will use Oman as one of the countries that looks into the future jobs, the fourth industrial generation. What jobs will become obsolete, what jobs will remain, and we might do a test on one of the companies. But let me give you these two examples before we leave today. In the oil sector, we used to send a person strapped with masks to take samples of the air. We don't do that anymore. Actually, the drone does it for us. So now we send the drone, we sit in an air-conditioned room, and usually it's young women in Muscat even, which is far away from the oil fields, who will analyze that data. So we do that right now. And we started unveiling all of these drones that will go next to the chimney, take a sample, and come back home. Then we have another technology whereby, you know, our oil is becoming thicker. And there was a point of time where we cannot get it out. So the only way to get it out, we invented the technology of putting steam into the oil, so then we excite the molecules to come up. Now, where do you get the steam from? I think as oil becomes thicker, it floats underneath, water floats on top of it. So when we suck it up, we probably suck up 3 barrels of water and 1 barrel of oil. So now we need to cook that water and re-inject it again where it belongs to excite more molecules to come up, as long as we can do it. Otherwise, we'll close the field. So how do we do that? How do we cook it? So we heard about a company called Glass Point. I think they're coming tomorrow. We invited them tomorrow. I don't know if they're coming. Have you found them? Anyway, Glass Point, this is a guy. I asked him, I said to him, what is your background? He said, I'm what you call a mechanical engineer dropout. He now owns, with the students there, 37% of the company. We own 20%, and then Occidental and Shell owns the rest. But listen to this story. They created a mirror. So actually, when water comes, we take the thick part, which is oil, and keep some of it, even though it has some oil, and run it into a mirror. So the heat that is captured from the sun will cook that water and make it into a steam status, and then bring it back again to the well. There is a lot of knowledge in that. And so now we invented a new level of mirrors, but they're not mirrors, and I'm not allowed to say, under intellectual property. And actually, we will make it so cheap. We did 1 football field. Now we're doing 10 football fields of that. You free gas. It is good for environment. Then we discovered that these mirrors will capture sand. So with them, these American guys in Silicon Valley, we discussed the technology. And don't ask me how, I know how, but I will not tell you. The molecules of sand do not make their way into this greenhouse by virtue of simple science. Let's put it this way. There's actually nothing innovative about it. It's just by understanding nature, how nature works, where sand wants to be trapped and when it doesn't want to be trapped. So the sand never makes it into the mirrors. So we created these greenhouses to put the mirrors, which means you could do as many as possible in the desert without having to clean the mirrors, because there is something that doesn't allow the sand to be attracted to come to them there. One thing or the other. All of what I just told you has nothing to do except with one thing that's in common, that is sharing knowledge. So we understand that the more we do fish, the more we do oil, the more we do gas, we would probably make more money selling it to somebody else other than selling it to ourselves by simply, there. And now we have a company. 12 years ago, 3 men left Petroleum Development Oman to start an energy company. They started with $60,000 US. One of them, he did not agree to join, so they talked to his wife. They sent their wives to talk to his wife. This is a true story. He was lecturing the other day and he said it. He said, you can share this. So they pulled this trick by pressurizing his wife to say, do you want to live all your life as a pay person? Or you want to join us, the future millionaires? So his wife told the husband, no, we want to join the millionaire lot. They borrowed another $160,000 US from somebody who lost faith in them and wanted his money back. They convinced the company to do. To cut the story short, 2 months ago, they listed their company $1.4 billion in NASDAQ. I think the wife is happy that she convinced her husband not to stay behind. This has nothing to do with PDO, the oil company. It has nothing to do with Shell or BP. It has nothing to do with anybody who does cementing, like Halliburton. It is simply 3 people who, as they left the oil company, they freed their mind from being trapped on how do we get oil into doing something totally different. And that drilling technology, that knowledge, that capability now is sold all over the world. And that's why their company is listed here. So I think we are definitely, undoubtedly heading for a knowledge-based economy. If you look at some of the things that Firas does, and I think please send an email with all the websites and connections of the people that are with us here today. She used to work with a family who did the size of this table woven material that used to be sold in Oman for $150 US. She now helped them change that into ties, and she boxed it in a box. And I think the tie is now 3 times as much as the cost of the big sheet. So it's not as much as making big things. It's making them smarter. It's adding value. Now, who designed for her? She wouldn't tell us. Definitely, she doesn't employ them full time. Who are the 800 families? She doesn't tell us, because obviously she has them in her system and nobody would tell. How could she put that, something I cannot do, only her can do? So it's that knowledge, that capability, that will make us and everybody else different. And I think because we are open, we are outward looking, probably that will help us migrate into a rather more approaching a knowledge economy than oil and gas. And there is one good thing working for us. We don't have enough oil and gas. That's the only good thing about it. It pushes us to think different.
The scarcity is the mother of necessity.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thanks so much, Ambassador. We have a small gift. If the students can come back up, please. Minister, Ambassador, can you come out front, please? Oh, no, please. You can.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Shukran.
Thank you.
Shukran.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
Thank you for hosting us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we get a photo over here? Thank you.
Thank you.
We look forward to many, many,
Well,
many interactions in
Thank
a
you
long-term
for putting
partnership.
up with the long talk.
Thank you so much. So much. Thank you so much.
And we hope to see some of you in Oman.
Ambassador, come here. Let's have one photo. Can we get one photo over here, my friends? Can we get one photo over here? Tuesday. Okay. Ambassador, please.
I can't take one without
Minister, we're going to take one more photo.